How's it going over there?
Doing okay. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Tell us about your new friends, your furry friends.
A couple of new furry friends, yes. They came with names, but I'm thinking about changing them. Pinot is one, and I think Pinot. I think that'll stay.
Like the wine?
Yeah. And the other one is called Captain, but I think that he might be Captain Cochise or Captain Jack Sparrow or Cappuccino, so trying to change his name, but he's the one that's a little bit more frightened.
Okay.
And shout out
These are little kitties, right?
They're 4 years old, brothers, and they come from the Cat Cove in Long Beach, which is a rescue place. So
that was nice of you.
Yeah, and they do a fantastic job. So if you're looking for a little kitty or a doggy, Cat Cove through PetSmart.
That's nice.
Yeah, and you? How you?
I got no animals.
I know.
Not right now. It's enough taking care of myself. I'm trying to be responsible for another furry four-legged friend is just going to drive me bananas. You know that.
I know that.
Although I love them, and I'll borrow anybody's that comes on our doorstep.
Yeah.
But so.
I hear you, buddy.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Confessional.
It's a good one. I'm Rita Wild.
I'm C.W. West.
This show, we are talking with the director of the new documentary, Laurel Canyon. Alison Ellwood is her name. This two-part documentary is all about the musicians that lived in the hills of Hollywood called Laurel Canyon. So much fantastic music came out at this time in this area during the 60s and 70s. It's great stuff.
If you haven't seen the two-part documentary, you can find it on the EPIX channel. And Alison tells us the stories behind the stories as she passionately has been working on this project for a while. So get ready to step back into the 60s and a little bit of the 70s with this great interview with Alison Ellwood.
Just so excited to talk with Alison Ellwood, who has just put out this amazing documentary called Laurel Canyon. I kept on hearing great buzzes about it, and I've got to say that it reaffirmed everything that I felt about the music of that time, and I still do, and it connected with me so much, and thank you. It was just fabulous.
Great, thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
It was beautifully done. So our podcast is called Rock and Roll Confessional, and we usually start off by asking you if there's anything that you would like to confess.
Well, I confess that I double booked this interview.
We should have just recorded at the same time and just seen what happened. Us and the other team, whoever they are.
The Go-Go's. It's the two films I have out at once. So anyway.
You're already promoting the Go-Go's?
Yeah, it premieres on August 1st. So it's at the Sheffield Film Festival. So we were doing a little virtual Q&A.
Oh, beautiful.
We'll come back around to that afterwards.
Yeah, because there's so much to talk about. It seems like there are some places in the world that are like these vortexes. Like Sedona, they have 4 to 7 vortexes. So they say, I've been to every one of them. And some of them, you definitely feel energy. Every time I went to Laurel Canyon, I felt energy. And again, watching this documentary, it's just so special. Do you think that there was some sort of magic coming out of there? Well,
I mean, it's always magic when like-minded people come together to create something that is new and different. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, just right up above Sunset. So you're right there with all the clubs there, and you're up above the smog line. So it feels like you're out in the country. The air is much cleaner. The views are spectacular, winding little streets. I mean, we kind of wanted to make the canyon a bit of a character itself in the film, and how the streets all connect with one another, how the artists all connect with one another.
It was done so organically.
But that's what's so fun about it, is that the place, that's what was so unique. And that was a big process of discovery, because my fear going into this with so many artists is that it would feel like an anthology. And this happened and that happened and this person started and that person started. But what we found were all these beautiful, as you say, organic connections that they had, and much like the topography of the place itself.
I know. I tried to map out bands and their connections. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, this is connected. And then all of a sudden the arrows kept on going everywhere. And you're so right in the film that everybody touched everybody and everybody influenced everybody. And it was just amazing.
Yeah. And everyone was open to that. That was part of it. Then now it feels very much more isolated now and insular. Whereas then it was about expressing and sharing and, becoming making lots of money and becoming stars was secondary to the art.
Exactly. And you touched upon that in the film where you said, when people started to move away, people were starting to get concerned of, hey, are they going to rip off that song or that riff or that line? It's, I guess it's human nature, but, I prefer to concentrate on the most beautiful times and the beautiful music coming out of there.
It was a time when doors were open. People literally would come in and out and, walk in, pick up a guitar and start playing their latest song. And, after the Manson murders, people started locking their doors. So there was a shift that they experienced too.
What was your connection to the whole project? Did you grow up in that area or did you grow up in Los Angeles?
I didn't. I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years, and I've always been a Doors fan, and I wanted to make a film about the Doors. And I started looking into it and discovered all of these other bands in the Laurel Canyon connection, even though the Doors weren't there for that long. So then I shifted the focus to making a film about the canyon and all these amazing bands. But at the time that the music rights were owned by so many disparate people and trying to get a deal, it just was impossible financially. So I put it aside. And then Jigsaw and Kennedy Marshall came back to me a few years ago and said, hey, we've got this Laurel Canyon film. Are you interested? And I was like, are you kidding? I've been trying to do this for years. So it was lovely that it came back around.
I love the way that it was shot also. I mean, we can talk about the way that it was shot later, but the way it's also told is through the eyes of two photographers. You had Henry Diltz, who was a big part of the scene, and somebody who I wasn't familiar with, Nurit Wild.
Yes.
And then I found out later, I guess she had a son with Michael Nesmith. So there's all that big connection and stuff like that. But I just love that, it was seen through their eyes, and it wasn't new interviews on camera with the band. It's like you kept that essence clear and pristine.
We wanted it to be immersive and experiential. So that was always the plan from the very beginning, is that none of the musical artists would be on camera contemporaneously. And also because some of them obviously sadly are no longer with us. So it would be a disparity of who was on now versus who isn't. But we just always knew we just wanted, once you're in that canyon and living in that life in that time, you stay there. And Nurit and Henry can take us out a little bit, because they're our guide through there.
Exactly.
They're connected to everybody. They're our documentarians. They documented the living experience. And they also have something to do on camera. They're showing us their photographs or their slides, whatever. They're not just talking straight to camera. So that was always the plan. And, it was tricky to pull it off because people, the initial screenings, people were like, who's talking? I don't, so we, just decided to universally ID people every time you hear them. Just put their name up so you know who's talking.
I want to commend you with that, because I've seen a couple documentaries where they only show it the first time that person's up there and you're supposed to memorize it the rest of the time. So, and I think Henry and Nurit, the fact you're kind of using their photographs to guide through this journey was incredible.
Yeah. And thankfully for us, they both took so many amazing photographs.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to ask about, as your job as the director, how much of that was editing and how much of that was looking through pictures and files and so forth?
Both. It's a combination of, I knew Henry from when we did the Eagles film years ago, and we filmed with him in that same location, actually. And when we were there doing those interviews, and going through those photographs, I was like, oh my gosh, you have all these other people here. So I knew that he had this amazing wealth of images from the Laurel Canyon time. So, he was one of the first calls I made. It's like, it looks like we're going to make this film. Are you on board with us? And he said, absolutely. And Gary Burden also, who sadly died since then, but he was also very excited to be in the film. Henry took the photographs, but Gary did the album covers that are so famous, so many of them. So it was really sad he didn't get to participate because he was super excited about this project. But we get to see him in the film, so that's good.
Yeah, that's good. It was weird going through it and seeing, they're not here anymore. They're not here anymore. And I love the special dedication to Elliot Roberts. I thought that was really special and sweet and, sad all at the same time.
Yeah.
How did you find some of this footage? I mean, this isn't all Getty images. Obviously the images were from the photographers, but how did you find the footage of the pre-recorded stuff? And how do you decipher or put out your timeline of all this information, and then you start having to narrow it down to basically 3 hours, I think.
Yeah. Well, we had amazing producers and researchers who were out, looking for stuff, and we reached out to individual people, anybody, did social outreach. But, a lot of this stuff exists. It's out there, and we just kept finding gems, and we were putting last minute things we were finding in up until the very end of the edit. But we had an amazing team of people working, around the clock on it. They just found some gems. But, as you say, we had to cut it down to 3 hours, and it was hundreds, if not thousands of hours of material we had to work with, both still photographs and moving pictures. Luckily people shot 16 millimeter back then, and it preserves so beautifully. Like, the later films like the Go-Go's, for instance, in the 80s, it's all video and it doesn't hold up as well.
Mm. You had a couple shots of Mickey Dolenz holding a camera, and I'm wondering if you got any material from him, because it seemed like he might have had a lot of stuff.
It's a funny, that 16 millimeter Mickey Dolenz material is infamous. And if Mickey actually has it, he's holding it close to his chest
Really?
And not revealing it. At one point when we were filming with Narit, I was going through some boxes with her, and I came across this 16 millimeter split reel, and I'm like, oh my God, could this be Mickey's footage? And she says, I don't know. Go look at it. So we took it to a lab, and it was just like Phil or something.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Supposedly it exists, but he hasn't shared it. So
Yeah, because a lot of those people, so artistically also went on to become like photographers, like Graham Nash. He's released a lot of really fun books. And then, of course, Joni. The only complaint I have heard about this is that it's too short, that it needs to, you could keep on going more and more and more. So that's a great compliment, I think.
Oh, that's great. As you always want to leave them wanting more, right?
Yeah, they definitely want more. So do you think it began with the Byrds?
Well, the scene in Laurel Canyon certainly did, because they were the ones first out there, and they all got houses up in the canyon. And then the Byrds had the hit with Tambourine Man, and people heard that on the radio, and then they were becoming big. And there was this shift going from the New York scene to Los Angeles. And there was a shift from the Brill Building, too, where these people were writing songs for other artists, transferring to the singer-songwriter writing for themselves and performing themselves. And so these bands just started coming out there, and then they'd run into someone and say, oh, you can go get a cheap place up in Laurel Canyon. And so they all just ended up there, but it was pretty quick. I mean, Zappa was the first one there. Yeah. And then Crosby and the Byrds were there. And then others just, no pun intended, started flocking there.
It's kind of interesting because everybody was talking about how cheap it was in Laurel Canyon. And it's like, wow, how cheap was that then, Because
not
you certainly can't, not anymore. And what an oasis that was,
But there were great surprises like Alice Cooper that I never knew was part of the group, that was up there or anything.
I had no idea. I did not know that either. It was a great surprise to find that out. And he has great stories about it,
too.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, going to Frank Zappa's place and showing up for the audition at 7 a.m. And Zappa's like, I meant 7 p.m. But go ahead, play anyway.
Well, he'd probably been up all night, so it was just, the last stop at the end of the day.
There were a couple of artists that I was like a little bit surprised that they were in there. One mentioning Alice Cooper. The other, of course, Frank Zappa, who you said was the first one, like in the canyon. And another one was the Monkees, in a sense, because the Monkees were different. I mean, it was a, made for TV kind of episode wanting to be rock and roll.
Beatles wannabes.
And they were all, actually in their own, they were all great musicians and stuff. And it's interesting to see all the people who wanted to be in the Monkees, like Stephen Stills, I think Paul Williams auditioned for it too, several people. But they treated them as, not like movie stars or TV stars, but as musicians.
Yeah, no, they were very much considered equals there, which was also something that was surprising for me to learn. Peter Tork was really the only one that with real music playing ability when they started. The others learned their craft.
Oh, okay.
And they were respected even more so because they made an effort to learn it. But they were absolutely part of it. I mean, they would throw great parties too, which was obviously a big plus.
That was interesting about Peter Tork.
Yeah.
We'll save that so people can watch that. And
I really enjoyed some of the footage that we'd never seen before of him playing. And I actually, when I was watching, I'm like, wow, he is really an amazing player. I think there's a scene in there where he's playing the banjo or something. And I'm like, he was picking like Flatt and Scruggs. It was like, this is amazing playing. So it was, it was so good to see that.
Yeah, Peter was very talented.
And I think it was interesting. I think in the film it documented that Stephen Stills, when he didn't get the audition, he said, well, try out my roommate. And that happened to be Peter Tork.
Peter, yeah.
I was like, that's, I never knew that. That's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the fun, those sorts of details were they kept popping up. It was so exciting.
So going back to the Byrds, they had so many offshoots of that band. And one of the big surprises to me in the film, and I was so happy to see it because I was such a fan of the band, Flying Burrito Brothers.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's like, you had Graham talking, and then you had all this footage of them like at Altamont and so forth. And that was just a great underrated band. I was so glad that you put them in there.
Yeah, and Bernie was in that.
Yeah.
And
Bernie going on to the Eagles. I mean, that band just spawned so many, it was like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Eagles, Graham Parsons.
Graham Parsons Project. Oh,
No.
sorry. Maybe that was his brother, Alan. So how much new footage did you have to shoot for this?
Well, we shot a lot, and we actually shot a lot on Super 8. So sometimes you might not even know whether it was original footage from back in the day or new stuff, because we intentionally made it look, shaky and, and old. We shot a lot of Super 8. We also did some, obviously stylized, we did all the helicopter shots for the aerials, and we did, a bunch of HD driving through the canyon stuff that we clearly was meant to be this is now. We're not trying to fake it. But we had a lot of fun with the Super 8 stuff, trying to make it look old. So, sometimes I think people won't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah. You couldn't really, it was blended so beautifully together. It was just art, and it was fantastic. Let's talk about some of the ladies of the canyon, because I was glad that you included a lot of those. And I think number one on my list would be Joni Mitchell. I mean, just what a fantastic artist, performer.
Yeah.
Person. And there's one photograph, I think it's a Henry photograph, and I'm not sure if it's at Mama Cass's, but Joni's playing acoustic guitar, and you have Eric Clapton just in awe. I mean, Eric Clapton is the god of guitar. They write that on the walls in London. Clapton is God. And he's just mesmerized by what she's doing. And if you've ever tried to play guitar and, play Joni Mitchell songs, I mean, that's the reason why I quit. It was like, I can't play. Oh, no. But she was...
Well, there was always a joke whenever someone would pick up a guitar that Joni had just played. They try to play it and they go, oh, no, Martian tuning.
Martian tuning, indeed. But it was just lovely to see the story of our house, that Graham, and is that house still there? Because I know that they used it in an episode of This Is Us.
Yep, that house is still there. In fact, Joni still owns it. She doesn't live there, but she still owns it.
Oh, that's great. Wow. It was just so magical.
I love that story also. It was never a song that I really appreciated until I saw your episode, and then it really hit. It really sunk into me. And such a simple, beautiful song that Graham wrote. It was such a love song.
Yeah.
It hit the peacefulness in my heart. And I just like, wow. And I have to say, I was never one to grow up in the 80s watching music videos. So to see just this little snippet of her looking in the window and looking at that, I don't know if that's the real picture of her looking at the vase or if that was just your editing crew doing that, but it really hit home.
I honestly don't know if that's that actual moment, but she is looking in a window out of Oz. So.
Yeah. It was beautiful.
God, it was great.
So Joni Mitchell, you could talk a million stories about her and just her wonderful writings and how she worked with all of the people involved. You also got in there Linda Ronstadt, who I think is one of the real unsung heroes of that era of music. I mean, she's done so many different types of music, but at that time, she was just incredible.
No, she was amazing. Her voice is just so spectacular. And, she was a little bit of an outlier from the rest of them in that she wasn't a songwriter herself. She, did other people's songs, sang other people's songs. But everyone always says that the way in which she sang the songs and the way in which her thought process for choosing the songs, that she was in essence composing in her own way, which I've always loved that analogy with her.
That is a great analogy.
She's an extraordinary talent. And she became, very big, right after that time. She was getting big during then, but she became huge. And I'm glad for her that she was able to explore all these other types of music, because that was always very important to her. Yeah,
I love that. And, love seeing that she's still doing what she can. And did you have a recent interview with her or not?
Yes.
Wow,
yes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, she was. Everyone was lovely to be interviewed. They were great. But yeah, we interviewed her at her home, and she was just a great storyteller and just lovely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Was there anybody you were looking for that is alive that you didn't want to participate or you couldn't locate?
Joni and Neil didn't want to be interviewed, and that's that's pretty much typical. That's it, we tried,
right.
But it wasn't a surprise. But thankfully with them, there were so many archival interviews that we weren't prohibited from telling their story. Carole King and James Taylor, I would have loved to have gotten, and they also declined. I think toward the end, we almost maybe got James to be agreeable, but we were literally done and about to deliver the film. It would have just wreaked havoc to open it back up. But those archival interviews didn't include any talk about Laurel Canyon or anything. So, in order to have included them, we would have really needed to get the interviews. So we couldn't get them. So that was a shame. Other than that, I don't think there's anybody that we couldn't get that we desperately wanted.
It was great to see Neil be so smiling, and some of the old Buffalo Springfield interviews on TV was like
Dick Clark.
Introducing, that's Neil. But then it was like, I thought, oh, wow, okay, that is Neil. When he said at the last minute of Woodstock, he didn't want to be filmed.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that story either.
Yeah.
And I kind of supposed to be Crosby, Stills, Nash Young up there, but we never saw Neil Young.
Yeah.
So what happened? Okay, we'll be back right after this.
Just such a wonderful documentary. If you haven't seen it, make sure that you do. It's, like W mentioned, on EPIX channel. You can qualify to get it, I think, on whatever cable service you is.
Wow, that went well. We're going to keep this in there, right? That's the fun part of owning the podcast is like, we don't have to take things out. We can make ourselves look just as stupid as we are.
Actually, we're trying to make ourselves look better.
Oh.
More intelligent.
Oh, okay.
So, some great music came out of Laurel Canyon. Alison has more stories, but time for a quick break just so we can give you a few big thanks.
First, to the fine folks, of course, at Patreon for supporting the show and sending in questions to ask our guests. As little as $1 a month gets you into the Cool Kids Club.
Ooh, who doesn't want to be in the Cool Kids Club? I know, I'm just
saying. And thanks to everyone that's been virus binging the episodes and telling friends and family, plus subscribing and rating, and of course, writing reviews on iTunes. This week's review is from Wild Bill. With the lovely Rita Wild and trusty CW, that's me, I'm very trusty. The question is, who are they going to find this week? The guests are an incredible collection of rockers. Hollywood couldn't write stories about the history these people have experienced.
Please go now to our website, rockandrollconfessional.rocks, and click on support to find out how you can help keep us alive.
Or just go to patreon.com. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can support us. Every little bit helps. So now, here we go, back to the second half of our interview with Alison Ellwood, director of Laurel Canyon.
That's good stuff. Another band that was just so magical. And one thing I noticed about some of these bands is that they only lasted about 2.5 years, but the amount of music, amount of great songs that they wrote and recorded that time. Mamas and the Papas. I mean, just, you had Michelle Phillips and Cass Elliot and, Denny Doherty and John. Just what great voices and harmonies.
Yeah.
And
that footage of them singing Monterey Pop, singing, it's just stunning.
Yeah.
The harmonies, amazing.
And that was one thing that I really picked up on a lot. And maybe why I always loved that music, because I always loved Everly Brothers stuff. And then you found all those harmonies. And when you were spotlighting Crosby, Stills, and Nash, it's like, that 3-part harmony, but it became one voice.
Right.
The way that they said, that's the way they described it. I always described it as magic. It was just phenomenal. And Bonnie Raitt, good old Bonnie Raitt. And I loved her connection with Jackson Browne. And Jackson Browne was a guy, he grew up here in Orange County. Well, part of the time, just such a youngster.
Yeah.
But he was the one that was imparting a lot of advice to people. And I found that very intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, he wrote These Days when he was 15. So obviously he's an old soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the amount of work. And then it's interesting to go back and look at his first album and Joni's first album, and the connection is David Crosby. Because Crosby produced both of those albums, and it was like, wow, it's just, just unbelievably and great.
Well, Crosby knew as a producer to let the artist be the artist, too, which was great. He didn't try to produce them. He let them.
Yeah. I love how he says that. He just kind of stood back and let them do their thing, and he took the credit.
Yeah. Yeah, but he says he did that, so that's cool.
Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely. I've got to talk about I'm glad it was one of your favorite bands because one of my favorite bands too, The Doors. Oh my God. Was it Jim Ladd that described The Doors as Laurel Canyon at night?
Yeah, the California sound at night.
Yeah, that was awesome. Jim Ladd is such an influence to both of us, and we absolutely adore him. And we've been to his house up in Laurel Canyon and met some great people and heard some great stories too. So it was awesome that you included him in that because it was just so fitting.
No, he's wonderful. Unfortunately, he sold that house like a year before we started filming. Otherwise, it would have been a great location.
Oh yeah. But he's good. He's happy now up in Northern California. CW saw him last year, I think.
Last August, I went up and visited him.
Yeah.
No, he's great. He's a sweetheart.
But the Doors, I mean, I remember seeing, Robbie Krieger and Densmore over at his house, many times when he'd have like little small parties and stuff. But what an amazing band. And when you figure that, they were over 1971, that worked, but it's still so timeless.
No, it's amazing. That music isn't for everybody. There's a lot of people that don't like it, but it's just always been something that I've been drawn to. And, there is a little bit of a darkness to it, but there's also a wonderful levity to it. Ray in the film says, we weren't all doom and gloom.
Yeah. And then, just the fact that Robbie wrote so many of those tunes, and it really was a collaborative effort. And it's just so strange that how alcohol and drugs really took Jim Morrison. I mean, so sad because everybody that I had talked to said he's just like the nicest guy until he drinks or until he does drugs. And, but I guess he was...
Pulls it out on stage.
Yeah. Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
I thought Ray had said something before in a past interview that he did, but maybe that's still not a true fact.
Well, Ray would also be saying that, that he's still alive, too,
That Ray's still saying Ray's alive or that Jim's alive?
Jim Morrison was alive, at that
Very
time.
true.
Well, when they were told that he was dead, nobody believed it because there'd been so many times they'd been told Jim's dead that no one really believed it at first.
Yeah.
And then you didn't have like instant phone connection to Europe or anything like that you could just show me a picture, It's like part of the myth. Yeah. But I also love the story that you wove in there with Love and Johnny Eccles.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. It's amazing.
You want to tell it or...
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away from the film, but basically Love was trying to get out of they had signed with Elektra. It was the first, rock band that Elektra had signed, and they were trying to break into that. And Love wasn't happy with the contract with Elektra, wasn't happy with the first album, and apparently they had another really good offer from another company. And so they were trying to get out of their contract with Elektra. So they decided to push the Doors on them and sent Elektra to 3 times it took to send the guy to go see the Doors. The first 2 times, Jim was drunk on stage and was just flailing around. He's like, I don't get what this is about. But the 3rd time, Jim was on and the audience freaked out and they signed the Doors that night at the club, at the Whiskey. And then Elektra put all the publicity money into the Doors and Love kind of got left in the dust.
And it's so sad because they had such great songs and it was new at that time. And you look back on times like today, that there were 2 African-American, two blacks in the band. And it was like, how great would that have been for rock and roll to continue that way, that all-inclusiveness,
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
But absolutely. I know there was another guitarist in the band, Brian. His sister is Maria McKee from Lone Justice.
McLean.
Yeah, Brian McLean.
Brian McLean.
Yeah, from Lone Justice. Yeah. That was great. And it was also interesting to see that no matter how much fun they were having, how much great music they were doing, there were 2 people in their lives that really had the business aspect down. And that was David Geffen and Elliot Roberts.
Yeah.
Elliot called his first management company Lookout Management because he lived right on Lookout Mountain, right up from Joni. And, it was very much, not just named after the street, but named because it was going to look out after these artists. And Asylum Records that he and Geffen started together, that was, the asylum, the place where the people that people didn't want, like Jackson Browne at the time, that's where they would land. And kick off their careers.
And that was just great business move for all of them. And the fact that they had somebody who was looking out for them and talking about recording rights and publishing rights and stuff like that. I just thought that was fabulous.
Music.
Yeah, fabulous. Because there are so many stories, sad tales of that time when people got ripped off of their music. But fortunately, they were.
No, a lot of them. And they all got savvier as time went on. And Glenn Fry really paid a lot of attention to the business end of it. So he was, much savvier going in than a lot of them. And Jackson just somehow intuitively was savvy just because he's Jackson.
Yeah. Awesome, Jackson Browne. Besides the Doors, was there another band that you really loved a lot?
I mean, I loved all of them, to be honest. I think with all of them, I kind of went through phases in my life where I would have a big Joni phase or a big CSN phase. I think Flying Burrito Brothers was one that I wasn't as much aware of at the time, which was so lovely to rediscover them. But yeah, I mean, they're all so good in different and unique ways, which is what's so fun about. I mean, everybody says there's this California sound. They all sound so different to me. I wouldn't, what does that mean?
I don't think it means anything. I think it just means they all came from the same place and they all have their original sound. But because they came from the same place, we'll call it California. How was making this documentary different from you made a 2-part Eagles documentary.
Which was great.
Yeah, 5 years ago. What was the difference between making those two?
In Laurel Canyon, there's so many artists we're covering, so we're not spending huge amounts of time on each one. And like I said, the challenging but the fun thing was finding the organic connections that the artists had with one another. The Eagles obviously was these guys that came together and it was a more linear kind of story to tell. And we did do interviews on camera with people. It's one thing when you do, that's the other thing with Laurel is that there would have been so many people going to camera all the time. It's a little bit jarring. Whereas with the Eagles film, you're going to the same people kind of over and over. So, and the story. And so it doesn't take you out. It's just part of the storytelling process. They're just very different approaches to films. In the Eagles film, I think, which is one of the reasons why the guys in the band liked the film so much when they first saw it, is that we really dove into their roots, where their influences came from. And we didn't, of course, have too much time for that in Laurel Canyon, a little bit, but, it's kind of assumed everyone's kind of coming of age out of this folk scene. So, it was fun to explore the roots in the Eagles film. And like I said, we didn't get into too much of that with Laurel, but no, they're just very different approaches to things, but, a lot of the same characters, which was fun.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to just get a little bit more of a feel of, as a director, because you've produced about 15 films, and I think you've directed about 15 films. So as a director, what do you have to do for this film? Are you literally you're not watching all the footage, but people are coming to you and saying, here's some great stuff. And are you the one that finally starts picking out the pieces and putting it all together?
No, I did watch a lot of it, actually. I mean, I worked very closely with the editor, Anush Chertzakian, who's a genius as far as I'm concerned. Just brilliant being able to pull all these threads of material together. We together and with the producers, we sort of come up with an outline of the story. And then we have our footage people looking for footage that might help tell the story. And it's very much a group effort in terms of, what threads we're following that are telling the story, what visuals we need to get to help illustrate that, what music, what songs work best. That it was a lot of swapping out of songs sometimes because a different song would work better for whatever reason. Sometimes it was visual. Other times it was part of the storytelling. It's it's a lot of communication, very tight knit group. I mean, I've worked with all these folks, or at least most of them, several times. So it's a very organic process we have with one another.
It was kind of sad, though, that you had mentioned Carole King and James Taylor, and they came in kind of like the second phase of Laurel Canyon. And it seemed to be something with the change of the times. Because, it's 66, 67, Summer of Love and Monterey Pop Festival. And in 68, you got the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy. And all these riots break out against the Vietnam War. And then Manson. And that's so weird about the Manson connection to all of those, some of those people as well. I mean, with the Byrds and Terry Melcher, I guess, was the producer. Yeah. And you brought out one person, I think it was with the Grassroots, that actually was a member of the Manson gang and is still serving a prison sentence.
Yeah, Bobby Beausoleil. Yeah, who knew Johnny Eccles of Love tells that haunting story about singing.
Yeah, that was really, really insane and crazy.
The thing that was really hard, I think, for all of them about Manson in particular is that Charlie Manson was a wannabe rock star and just wasn't any good, and Melcher turned him down. So there was this anger at Melcher. They thought for a long time he was trying to get back at Melcher for rejecting him. But, it touched people, very close to home. People knew who these people were. And, suddenly, I think Alice Cooper says it in the film. It's like suddenly hippies weren't looked at as long-haired, freaks. They were like, these people are potentially dangerous.
And that was scary. That's when it changed. And then the 70s kind of ushered in this thing of, kind of like soft rock, You've Got a Friend, Fire and Rain, stuff to make you comfortable and so forth. And just an amazing documentary. And congratulations so much on that. I mean,
thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Let's talk about the Go-Go's real quick if you can, because
which I haven't researched. So
but I know that it's you said it's coming, but you've got you did the history of the Eagles, which was brilliant, and then now you've got the Go-Go's coming out. What's that called, and when can we see it, and all that good stuff?
It's called The Go-Go's, and it premieres on Showtime on August 1st at 9 p.m. And it's their story from the beginning to basically up to when they broke up for the first time. So it's very heavily rooted in their punk roots, which is really fun because I didn't really know much I was not really a big punk person, so I've always loved the Go-Go's and been a fan of their music. I didn't understand how deeply they came from the punk world. And there's lots of great stories and lots of fun footage. And they're a lot of fun to watch on screen, both in their interviews and in performance and everything.
We had a podcast about 2 weeks ago with John Doe of X. And, he was talking about the Go-Go's, and it was like some of the things that are being written now, or actually it was, which book was it? Everybody was thinking that she was just so, innocent. And Kathy, I know, has got an all-tell book coming out too, Kathy Valentine from the band. So
yeah, it's out now. It's brilliant. It's wonderful. Well, all I ever wanted.
Now, Alison, one of the things we do at the end is we have what's called the bonus round. So it's kind of like the lightning round in the old game shows. So we're just going to throw a bunch of questions at you.
Oh, boy.
No pressure. So what was the very first concert you went to?
The Rolling Stones, Wembley Hall, London, 74.
Beautiful. Who would you want to meet you've never met?
Barack Obama.
Okay. Now, this is one of our normal questions, so I'm going to try to shake it up for you. If you were making a documentary film, what rock subject would it be on? So how about, is there a fictitious film or anything, because you've made so many documentaries, is there anything that's not considered a documentary film that you would want to make? I
would actually love to do a fiction film on a band. I think that would be really fun.
Spinal Tap is a documentary, but sort of.
That's one of my all-time favorite films. But really like having actors play, like you can really dig in deep to the story.
Who was the biggest influence in your life?
Wow. My mom.
Okay. Do you have a cool piece of memorabilia, rock and roll memorabilia?
I don't think I have memorabilia. I've moved too many times. Stuff got lost. But I have a cool poster signed by the Go-Go's.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice. Yeah.
Is there a band that you regret never seeing live?
Prince.
Mm. And any other big band that you would think about possibly doing another documentary on?
No, I mean, I would be interested in lots of different bands doing that. It's such a right. I mean, first of all, the music's so wonderful, and the characters are interesting. I mean, artists are volatile, and they're good. They're good for stories in that respect.
Yeah.
So I don't want to name anybody offhand, but there's so many that would be interesting to do.
Yeah, I'd love to see that Doors. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but it's so complicated but I would love to do that. That's always been one of my dreams, is to make a film about them.
Maybe in the future we'll see it.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you again, Alison Ellwood. Appreciate it.
Alison, thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay, bye. Bye.
So, Reeds, that's such a cool documentary. We saw both parts.
I loved it. I watched it probably 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And every time it was just magical.
It's got your girl, Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
Along with so many others. My God. I was so amazed. And the whole part about, Frank Zappa and Alice Cooper being up there. And it's nice to see all that footage and hear all the music. And it's really cool.
It's good stuff. So hopefully you've seen it. If not, you can check it out, like we said, on EPIX channel.
So special thanks to Alison Ellwood for sharing her time with us today. And Laurel Canyon, as Rita said, can be found on EPIX channel. If you don't have EPIX, you can get a free trial through Amazon Prime. Just go to Amazon Prime and learn how to sign up for that week and binge watch the 2 episodes.
Special thanks today to 2 of our very favorite people, Jim and Helene Ladd.
Thank you so much, you guys.
For contacting Alison for us. We appreciate you guys so much and hope you are doing well. And of course, Jim is still Mr. Radio DJ.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff on Sirius XM Channel 27. He's on Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific time. And just does fantastic stuff. I mean, so many times it's like I need music to fit my mood, and I tune in, and there he is, just playing the songs that, are playing in my mind that I didn't know were playing there, but I needed to hear.
We need to do a documentary on Jim.
Yes, we do.
We should take our phones up there because we don't have a huge budget yet.
So thank you, Jim and Helene, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we'll be up there in a few days, so make sure you're all primed up and pretty looking. So we got some really exciting shows coming up in the future, so subscribe so you don't miss any. And we need your help in a few ways. Please help with any of the following on Facebook. Like us, share us, follow us, rate us, and write a review on iTunes. Make a small pledge on Patreon, and tell your friends and family and everyone to listen.
We appreciate everyone's help. Keep rocking, stay safe, continue to wear your masks.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Bye.